Going to our next speaker. I think dialing in from New York, Lex Sokolin. Consensys, are you with us?
Yeah, how's it going?
Well, pretty well. I'm going to say good morning to you. I think you're dialing in from New York, right?
I'm coming in from London, but I'll keep my New York accent on for now.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I was thinking, like, you're from Consensys, and I've been to your main office in Brooklyn, in New York. So I thought maybe you're dialing in from there, but you're from London, so that's good to know. So you're already on the run for quite some hours.
I wouldn't say I'm on the run, but some people in crypto are on the run. I'm fairly comfortable being put, but yeah, it's been a good day so far. Busy.
Now, indeed, some people are on the run when it comes to crypto. After FTX, yeah, you mentioned this in one of the interviews that it started a confidence crisis in the ecosystem as a whole. How are we going to solve this one? I mean, we saw, of course, the Terra Luna, we saw Celsius, but now, FTX, one of the most trusted partners when it came to buying and selling cryptos, NFTs, and so forth. How are we going to solve this crisis?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question, and it depends on who the we are in the question as well. Mm-hmm. And there are many ways to tackle thinking about it. I think you could start saying that the crisis, the infrastructure to avoid this type of crisis is already solved. It's been in place for years and years and years, and it is available to any user of digital assets anytime. And of course, what I'm talking about is non-custodial uses of non-custodial wallets. So using wallets like MetaMask or others to directly hold assets on chain, right? So there are a couple of issues around FTX, and we can open them up depending on what you're interested in. But yes, one of the issues is that it is a financial crisis in the sense that FTX was a broker of financial assets, meaning tokens. It was an exchange on which that brokerage happened. It was also the custodian underneath the exchange. So a lot of kind of bundled financial services functions for it. FTX itself was not the creator of like meaningful blockchain protocols. It was not creating economic activity on chain. While it was investing in a lot of stuff, it wasn't, a technology firm that was building and developing lots of projects that were non-financial in nature. And so I think we've got this kind of confusion going on in the industry about crypto, quote unquote, being all about how can we trade the coins and the tokens? And yes, that's really important. And it's for many people, it used to be fun. It's certainly a lot less fun now. But it's the same question as, during the internet boom in the late 90s, early 2000s, if the only thing we were talking about was day trading internet IPO stocks. And clearly, that was a bad financial experience for a lot of people. At the same time, the underlying trends of the internet being important and the internet being infrastructure for large scale digital media and so on, the organization of information into an enormous collective, the building of data, the building of connectivity between people and businesses, clearly that was much, much, much more important than the day traders that were trying to figure out which brokerage is the right brokerage to get the first access to the IPO and has the best forums. It's the wrong questions to ask. So I think for me, and I'm somewhat biased coming from Consensys, which focuses on builders and users, my questions are all about what is the economic activity that's coming out of Web3? And how do people engage and participate in that economic activity, either as users through something like MetaMask or as builders, developers, entrepreneurs using tools that allow them to create things on computational blockchain protocols, create software, create collective organizations like DAOs, create digital objects, whether they are NFTs or art, or virtual objects inside of worlds, digital worlds, and so on. And so the answer is, like, number one, don't expect a brokerage business to behave in any way differently from brokerage's businesses in the past. So we shouldn't be surprised by those mistakes. But then number two is realize that you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on how the price goes up and down and how to trade stuff around. And you're missing the forest for the trees, because you're not seeing what actually Web3 infrastructure does for the economic architecture of the internet and how people can actually build new things.
Now, as Consensys, you are building quite a lot of new things. You're also one of the builders of the MetaMask wallet, of course. You are quite a tech company. You, Lex, are a chief economist of Consensys. Why does a tech company, focused on building stuff, need a chief economist?
Yeah, great question. I would say that because it's a question about me. So I think the interesting answer goes to the nature of Web3 versus Web2. And the nature of Web2, and one of the amazing things that had happened was the transition of computing from the desktop or the laptop into the cloud. And then the ability to put software into websites or mobile apps such that anyone could download a piece of software on their phone, or they could access any content, whether that content was text, written content, whether it was a piece of music, whether it was video, any of these things. And so the outcome of Web 2 was that the user, the consumer, the retail consumer that downloads the application and uses the application becomes almost the black hole around which that software is designed. So if you think about the world prior to the internet of media, you have much more monolithic companies building products often in a vacuum and then running gigantic marketing campaigns, pushing information and pushing products and stories out at people, right? People are passively receiving advertising, marketing campaigns. They're sort of there's a big channels through which distribution happens, like malls or the 10 TV channels, whatever, and you're being pushed at these different products. Web 2 flipped that, where the power ended up with the consumer, because the consumer ended up having infinite choice of content, because everything's digital and arranged on Google or YouTube or whatever. Infinite choice of financial products, because you can flip between one neobank, robo-advisor, payments app very quickly. Just download a different one. And so the design pattern in Web 2 started to organize around user experience, product managers. Instead of the business driving, it became the software and the product manager leading the design process around a customer demand. And of course, Silicon Valley was the big force, let's say, commoditizing these approaches. Web3 has a different architecture. Unlike the internet of attention or the internet of media, where digital goods are free and the only thing you can pay for is attention, and therefore you have to design around human attention, Web3 has an economic architecture for digital objects, meaning that you can have scarce digital objects around which commerce can happen. So if you think about, and I'm not going to use the word metaverse, but I'm going to point to this like third space that we inhabit, this digital space that we inhabit, right? So there's the home, there's the office, and then there's the digital space that you exist in. For some people, it's crypto Twitter. For other people, it's LinkedIn. For some people, it's a virtual rendered environment, whatever. But in this digital space, there is the opportunity for commerce around digital objects that make your digital space more social, more human, more connected, and the commerce that's emerging around these things, and you can see these as NFTs, which again are just a primitive digital object, is that people can own these digital objects, and they're non-fungible, so other people don't have the same exact thing. It's unique to you, and you can actually start to build an identity and a set of experiences. So the economic architecture of Web3 is different from the prior version of the internet, and because it is economic and because it is financial in nature, the exchange and the commerce all happens in digitally native assets, in tokens that are kind of coming out of this entrepreneurial moment. And so unlike a company whose business model is, how do we charge dollars for advertising, Consensys and companies like Consensys are in a place where you're asking the question of, how do we manage a business that takes payment in thousands, hundreds or thousands of different tokens? And so, with every single day, we have to make decisions around how to prioritize the revenue that we're taking in versus our costs. And there's an asset allocation decision embedded into it. At the same time, we also understand that the products that we launch they're not just things for people to download and click around on. That's the Web2 motion, that they have to be communal, that end of the day, they have to be communally owned, that there's an element of public infrastructure and public goods that's really important. And so, a meaningful part of the economics work, the crypto economics work, is to figure out how to design tokens and economic ecosystems where token incentives actually work, where they're embedded into the product footprint, and where it's not just sort of a financial engineering game, but there's an actual kind of tokenized community that is contributing to the product's growth. So I would say that makes Web3 different in terms of the types of things you're delivering, and it also creates a different type of demand for the skill sets that a company needs to have.
And are these the projects that you're building also for clients, but also for the wider web? Does it also always consist of an ecosystem? I can see that when you're working on tokenization, you maybe want to launch a token, use it in a broader ecosystem. But I can also see some organizations, some companies that think like, we don't need an ecosystem. We just want to make use of the technology. Or is it like Consensys always, is focusing on building an ecosystem, using the ecosystem, or?
I think end of the day, you make choices about what it is that you're trying to do, and you fit your strategies to that particular pocket of demand, right? So if you're out there trying to pitch CBDC infrastructure to a central bank, you're probably not going to be also bundling that with DAOs and NFTs from popular artists. I think my personal bias is that focusing on the parts of Web3 that are legitimately novel is the much more, let's say, meaningful piece of work than figuring out how to help companies save cost. It's always going to be, what is the new emerging space that you have unlocked with a particular technology? What are the things that you weren't able to do before that you now can do? And therefore, how do you leverage the the creative potential of all the people that want to participate? And I think that's unique to the Web3 paradigm. I used to be in fintech before crypto and DeFi, and there's a mass difference between how excited people get around fintech companies, which is not very excited, and how excited people get around particular DeFi protocols. The same thing, different infrastructure. The reason people are excited is because they get to build things together collectively as like a multiplayer team. And I think thinking of crypto as an asset and nothing else is a cognitive error. And then I think thinking of crypto as like a efficiency technology you put into your horrible back office of 20 other technologies is also kind of a short-term mistake. But for me in particular, and then I think for Consensys more generally, we do orient around Web3 as an economic architecture, and then how do we make it easy for builders to build on it, and how do we make it easy for users to use it?
Yeah. And looking into the future, I found this beautiful quote from you that mentioned like the most expensive mistake one can make is failing to prioritize the things that matter for the future over the things that used to be important but won't be anymore. I don't know if you still remember giving this quote, but I'm curious to learn from you. Do you have an example where people still, prioritize things that are now important that won't be in the future? And do you see these kind of things happening with clients or people that you work with?
It's a difficult question. Sometimes things are written for Twitter in a particular way. So I appreciate being called out on it. But I think it's a reminder to myself, and I've got a personal bias, I try to balance out two different ways of being. The first way of being is like this training that I have in finance, business, and the law. So I have an academic background in those areas, and I've worked on Wall Street, and I'm very interested in systems design. And so for me, when you look at that, you want to understand systems, and then once you understand a complex system, it feels good. You've sort of cracked the puzzle, and then you want it to continue to exist. Once you understand how the payment rails work, you want Visa to continue existing, and you cheer for it when it wins. When you understand how macroeconomics work and how the central banking system, tries to design a good living experience for the citizens of a nation, sort of a sane person should cheer on the success of that. And I think a large part of me is often can default to saying this works and therefore it's good, or even more confusing would be something is rigorous. So there's a complicated spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet has a lot of math, and the math looks good. Or there is some complicated algorithm, and because it's rigorous, then you start to believe that it's right. On the other hand, the other part is trying to think like an artist, right? So the artist starts with a blank canvas every time you are in front of a new painting, and you are designing, or when you're creating something, not only are you creating the content and the message, the substance of the image or story that you're putting together, but you're also creating the language, the style in which that substantive story is rendered. And it's really powerful, right? To start with a blank canvas and say, I'm going to construct almost entirely intuitively, bottoms up a new thing. And artists do this routinely. The nothingness from which you start is a positive. And then on the other hand, engineers and financiers and central bankers and so on, and I'm painting with a broad brush, which is unfair, but generally start with existing systems and think about, well, how does it plug into the thing that I have? And so I think what I wanted to point to as a tension with that quote is to say, it's easy to prioritize the wrong thing. It's easy to prioritize the functioning of a well-oiled machine, even though that well-oiled machine might be completely irrelevant in the next 20 years. And you can look at history, right, and say, look, the payment systems of 2020, were they the same in 1950? Well, obviously not, but people still got to pay for things. They still got to buy sandwiches and eat them. And they still, are the banks of 2020, are they running on the same technology that they were in 1950? Obviously not, but people had savings. What about 1850s? Were there payments in banks then? Yes, it's a recurring sort of human pattern that you need particular financial services for a society to function. In the 1200s, was there money and was there savings, right? And the answer is yes. But the technology on which all this stuff sits is a footnote. It doesn't really matter. It changes over time. And so I think no matter how well oiled our machines are today, clearly they will not be the same in 20 years time. And so I think that quote is a reminder to myself to prioritize novelty and to prioritize things that might be a little bit challenging, but it could be the new language in which things are rendered.
Now, you have these conversations also with governments, I guess. Are you also trying to challenge them a little bit to think with a blank sheet, to really start with like a clean sheet with their regulations or their thoughts about the Web3 technologies? Or how do they usually respond when you try to give them these insights, give them these backgrounds?
I think the challenge is, I think, to show, not to tell. So you can tell people stories, and you can kind of try to bring them along on a persuasive journey. But end of the day, the most powerful evidence is when you actually show people what's possible. And so instead of trying to persuade people with PowerPoints and so on, I think building an ecosystem is one of the best ways to do it, and that's what we've done in Web3. I apologize, I've got to hop just for 1 second. I've got someone buzzing in, so I'll be right back.
No worries. Right. Meanwhile, we're going to look at what's next for the Dutch Blockchain Week, the virtual main event. Now, after this, again, we will have a short break. And after the short break, we have a couple more exciting speakers speaking about things like play to earn. We have the awards for the Dutch Blockchain Awards. And also some other really exciting conversations there. So that's up for the next session. Before we go to the next session, we're going to close down the conversation with Lex. We will post some more information about the speakers and all the projects that they have been working on also on our website, dutchblockchainweek.com. Now, if you're interested in blockchain technology, in cryptos and so forth, then definitely have a look at our website, dutchblockchainweek.com as well, because throughout the week, we have over 30 events happening all over the Netherlands, all kinds of events that are actually organized by our ecosystem partners, ranging from universities to companies to individual enthusiasts. So make sure you have a look at our website, dutchblockchainweek.com, for the other events. But I'm now going to finalize the conversation with Lex. Lex, you're back, I see, from the buzzing. Closing down the conversation. From your side, there's a lot of exciting things happening within Consensys. Let me start with that. What's up next? What is happening in the upcoming year? Is there already like a cool project or cool developments that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the 2 main motions that we're focused on are MetaMask, helping more users get into the space, and then Infura, which is helping developers build on top of decentralized infrastructure. And so for both of those, we are exploring, I would say, token models or progressive decentralization ideas, and we've been public about both. So on the Infura side, we are trying to figure out how to make that infrastructure available in a more public way so that there could be other node operators that participate in a decentralized Infura network and allow in a much faster way to spin up different protocols and applications that attach into the distribution footprint. And the distribution footprint's about 500,000 developers today. So that's a chunky piece of work that we're trying to figure out. And for parts of the audience who are interested in participating in being an infrastructure provider, please do reach out to Consensys.
Yeah. And also do follow you on Twitter, on LinkedIn, because you're posting daily content, which I think is very interesting to get all these insights from the global Web3 ecosystem. Looking at this global Web3 ecosystem, what are you really looking forward to in the upcoming year? What kind of exciting developments in the ecosystem are you really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, we as a community need to figure out how to have a Web3 economy. Like we need to unfortunately, the financial crisis in crypto, the liquidations that have started with Terra and Luna and have spilled into Celsius and Voyager and Three Arrows Capital and have now hit FTX and will continue to hit other companies. Unfortunately, that is a big distraction to people trying to build businesses and a livelihood on blockchain rails, on Ethereum, on Polygon, on Arbitrum, and so on. And so the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is how DAOs evolve into productive units of an economy. So if we think about small businesses in the traditional economy, right, turning into large corporations and so on, we need to have an equivalent economic structure within Web3. And right now, DAOs are the closest we've got to collective groups of people pooling together their labor to create products and services that then other people engage with. And so I think the main question for me is, is there a Web3 economy separate and apart from fundraising and derivatives? Are there things that people can be doing? And I think there's a lot of evidence for the answer to be yes. But how does that grow? How many DAOs are there? How active governance is? What's the tooling around DAOs? Can people onboard and then make a living from being a DAO contributor and then use the compensation for contributing to a DAO to actually live their life, pay their rent, eat their food, all of that. So I think that's the main thing that the crypto ecosystem has to prove over the next year, or maybe 3 to 5 years. And then once we have a Web3 native GDP, then supporting that with a DeFi banking sector, or supporting that with media services that live on chain, like all of that starts to click in. But it's really, do we have the economic engine separate and apart from the real economy to sustain this ecosystem?
Nice. Yeah, and when it comes to DAOs, actually, we should link you with the researcher that we had yesterday in our event. We already published 5 academic research papers about DAOs. So about the activity in are DAOs really DAOs, right? Decentralized and autonomous, etc. But I think one of the most important lessons that I learned in this conversation is that we have to show more instead of just telling. Like Sokolin, joining us from London. Many thanks for the conversation. Wishing you a great day ahead. Good luck with all the great work also that you're doing with Consensys. And have a great day.
Thank you so much.